Jai Sachidanand, brothers and sisters. Welcome to the 8th webinar of Hscrf, Oak Ridge, Tennessee. Thank you very much, first of all, for joining. Our today's topic is acceptance. And today we have esteemed speaker, Mr. Nimesh Patel, sir. Dr. Nimesh Patel is a physician specializing in molecular genetic pathology. He is currently Senior Laboratory Director for a laboratory that performs genetic testing for cancer patients throughout the world. He has also received formal training in philosophy and is an active learner student of holistic science of Dada Bhagwan. Welcome, Dr. Nimesh. It's my wonderful privilege to listen to you, sir. I
Jai
hope I'm
Sachidanand.
audible, all the participants. If
Yes,
you
yes.
have any query, any question, you can also use our chat box, okay? So let us request Dr. Nimesh to start the session. Acceptance, a very wide and profound topic. Over to you, sir. Thank you.
Jai Sachidanand. Thank you so much for the introduction and for the opportunity to speak on this topic. Would somebody like to read the three mantra?
Yeah. Let us read together. Namo Arihantanam, Namo Siddhanam, Namo Ayariyanam, Namo Uvazyayanam, Namo Loe Savva Sahunam, Eso Pancha Namukkaro, Savva Pavapanasano, Mangalanam Cha Savvesim, Padamam Havai Mangalam, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Namah Shivaya. Jai Sachidanand. Jai Sachidanand.
Jai Sachidanand. Thank you. Now, if anybody has any questions or comments, I can't see the chat fully, so please feel free to unmute and speak. So I'd like to start today's topic by asking all of you, when you think of the word acceptance, what images or words come to your mind? Can anybody offer any thoughts on this topic?
Dr. Nimesh, as far as acceptance, the first thing that comes to mind is serenity.
Oh,
Excellent. Thank you, Shailaben. And why do you say that? I'm curious.
The experience has been that until there's acceptance, there cannot be any progress on the journey inward. So the more acceptance of what is as it is, the inward journey becomes much easier to navigate.
Yeah, very, very profound. And I think hopefully that becomes clear to everybody as the discussion goes further. Does anybody else have any other thoughts on this? Okay, thank you. So we'll move forward, but feel free to add any thoughts as we discuss further. So before we go discuss this topic, I'd like to actually ask somebody to read this quote from Dada Bhagwan. We can read enlightened beings' words directly. It'll be very beneficial. Any
yes, from
volunteers?
participants.
Sure, I can.
Please.
Eternal law of acceptance. What is nature's language? What appears to be justice or injustice by worldly viewpoints is all justice in nature's language. So accept that whatever has happened is just and correct. Even if you are not ready to believe, you will have to accept it after going through agonies.
Oh my God.
Dada Bhagwan.
Thank you. Thank you for a beautiful reading. If you don't remember anything else we discussed today, then please remember the words of the enlightened being. And this we will try to discuss and dissect what's being said here, but really it's said so simply and beautifully. So thank you for the wonderful reading, Pino. I should also mention this quote and many of the topics discussed today come directly from this book, Secrets of Holistic Living. So if you have not read that, highly recommend reading end to end. And this is the first chapter in the book. Now, what is really acceptance? We can view acceptance as an internal change. It's sort of what Shaila Ben was alluding to. But when we think about acceptance, what we are trying to achieve is really to accept all individuals and situations with equanimity or grace. And commonly, when we think about acceptance, different techniques that are taught are meditation or introspection. And typically, what we try to achieve is an internal change which corrects external situations, such as health, business conditions, various situations in our family, things that we experience in a day-to-day life, and to try to correct that in a limited way. And we also view acceptance as being the opposite of reaction. So if you look on this picture on the right, we can see that there's an external event that happens, which is that rain occurs. And we can approach that situation in a few different ways. The first is to form opinions about it, such as, I don't like the rain, or I wish it wasn't raining, or it's always like this, and it makes me unhappy. These are examples. I should note, though, that these are negative examples. Similarly, and for another situation, we might even have positive opinions. So here, the main point is that approaching this situation that's an external event and forming opinions about it. On the other hand, we can view the rain and simply just accept it for what it is, that it's raining. So you see here, sort of jokingly saying "yep," which is in American parlance is just agreeing to the fact that it's happening. And so acceptance here, it really means to observe the external happenings without forming any opinion about it. And when I mentioned earlier about correcting external situations, I should say that correction here doesn't necessarily relate directly to the external facts, but rather to removal of our internal opinions. And I think this sort of ties to what Shaila Ben was also beautifully discussing earlier as well. Now, there's this spectrum of non-acceptance, acceptance, and over-acceptance. And acceptance is at the center of this spectrum. On the extreme ends are non-acceptance and over-acceptance. So if we think about some everyday examples of what acceptance means on a practical level, we can respond to sickness in the body with treatment. And so the way to do that in terms of the spectrum, if you were to think about how to do this from the acceptance standpoint, you could do that by changing certain life habits, changing your diet, and other simple things that eventually lead to an internal change. Similarly, if you have a business loss, the response to that would be a form of acceptance is to change the strategy by introspection and then correcting the situation. So it's sort of a balanced approach rather than an extreme of over-acceptance or non-acceptance. And if we again look at this spectrum, if we look at non-acceptance, it's actually the effect of over-acceptance. So these principles are all related to each other. For example, if one over-accepts himself, then he can become very egotistical. And so that ego strengthens within himself. On the other hand, if he does not accept himself and starts to reduce himself, then he can feel worthless. He has depression and all of these type of effects. So having these unbalanced responses leads to these type of consequences. And so in our everyday interactions with other people, we find that when somebody does not accept other human beings gracefully, the result may be loss of wealth and health. So there may be consequences in our everyday life as well. And this may be in this life or it may be in future lives. And what we find is that this effect is due to the failure in managing these interpersonal relations well. And so this management of our relationships with other people is extremely important. In fact, if you look at non-acceptance of things like clothes or furniture, or, different things that we interact with in our everyday life, non-acceptance of those material things is not as dangerous as non-acceptance of people and situations. So when we are dealing with these things in our everyday life, it's extremely important to be able to manage those well. So what is non-acceptance? Non-acceptance is the reactionary effect of over-acceptance. So again, these things are all interrelated principles, and by being out of balance, you eventually end up in the other direction. So some examples of this would be giving opinions about people or situations, forming likes and dislikes. And this non-acceptance we find is often rooted in fear and anxiety, these different types of emotional states. And it often deals with an egoistic state. Now, what are the effects of non-acceptance? Typically, it can result in suffering. And also in terms of one's progress, it can actually result in stifling of your own growth and transformation. So it's extremely important to be able to recognize and to deal with it appropriately. Now, in terms of the effects of non-acceptance, one of the key results is loss of energy. And even if we were to observe ourselves and observe other people that we interact with, when we see that there is non-acceptance, we see that the result is that it often creates an internal and external friction. And that friction, just like in physics, ends up using up your energy. And so in your bodily and psychic system, that ultimately the energy levels reduce. And in fact, that can affect your immunity and possibly even lead to disease. So the effects of non-acceptance are actually quite severe, both on a psychological level and also physical and spiritual level. I also wanted to share this here. This is a beautiful prayer that is often said in various settings in the West. Most frequently, we see it in when you have people that are recovering from addiction. This is often a prayer called the Serenity Prayer that is said. Would anybody like to read it? Can I get a volunteer, please?
Yes, anybody from participant? This beautiful prayer, please.
God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference.
Oh,
Serenity.
beautiful. Thank
Yeah,
you.
beautiful. So this is really like a universal concept. You can see that anywhere in the world, this is sort of recognized in terms of the wisdom. Now, one of the key factors that we face in our everyday lives is our interaction with other human beings. And you can see here that non-acceptance is frequently encountered with many different people. This could be our immediate family members, our neighbors, work colleagues, and even government officials. So frequently we encounter situations where we ourselves experience non-acceptance. We may be not accepted, or we may observe others not accepting. But this here at the bottom, this is a beautiful commentary that is discussed again in this book on holistic science. And it says that as long as somebody is not accepted and hence avoided, a man or woman worse than the people that we have not accepted is put in our path by nature until ultimately we learn to accept the uniqueness of human beings. So it's really amazing, amazing concept. And in fact, I sort of feel like I experience this at work. Sometimes we have colleagues that we may try to avoid. And later on, we may find that somebody else comes along who is creating much more turmoil for us. And really, that's nature's way of telling us that we have to learn to accept that every human being is unique in their own way and must be accepted. Additionally, we also find that those people are coming in our path likely because of past effects that we ourselves have sown. So, in fact, we should be thankful for them because they are helping us to relieve ourselves from our past causes. And in fact, we find that this is not true not only of other human beings, but also with our situations that we face every day. So, really, it comes down to accepting the situations and people that we experience in our everyday life. And if we don't accept these, then nature will continue to teach us about the importance of this. Now, there are a variety of different forms of non-acceptance, and one that is commonly experienced is fear. And we see this as a common form of a response to uncertainty. In addition, we can see that non-acceptance of people and circumstances frequently leads to various other forms of suffering. So it could be not only fear, but it could also be anxiety and a variety of these different emotional states. But in fact, non-acceptance of our true nature causes the greatest suffering. So ultimately, all of these forms of non-acceptance lead to various forms of suffering. And that's why it's important to recognize this concept and to be able to move away from that balance back towards acceptance. So would anybody like to read this shloka from the Gita?
Yeah, I can read it.
Thank you.
The soul is never born nor dies at any time. Soul has not come into being, does not come into being, and will not come into being. Soul is unborn, eternal, ever existing, and primeval. Soul is not slain when the body is slain.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you very much for reading that. This is from Bhagavad Gita, and really what it's telling us is that the strongest form of non-acceptance is our non-acceptance of the impermanence of life and also the transitory nature of life. This is really the strongest non-acceptance that is perhaps binding us to this cycle of life and death. But ultimately, we must accept that death is for the body and not the soul. So this is something that is key for us to learn in our spiritual progress. And until we learn that, nature will keep continuing to put these different methods of learning in front of us. Now, what happens if we continually find that we can't accept? We are stuck in this form of non-acceptance. Then there's still a solution. In that situation, we can still gracefully accept the result of our non-acceptance. And by doing that, it will reduce the damage. So if something happens in our life and our initial response is to not accept that, there will be a subsequent consequence of that. And in that case, that consequence can itself be accepted. And by doing that, we can continue to build this sort of muscle for acceptance that allows us to train ourselves to see these events and to help remove these barriers that are causing us to not be able to accept them. And this form of acceptance is called secondary acceptance. And so one key thing to recognize here is that being accepting is not being helpless. It doesn't mean that you are powerless and you can't do anything in these situations. In fact, we have to recognize that, in fact, there are some things that may just be harder for us to accept. And this may be because there are deep knots that are tied. Maybe a past non-acceptance is continuing to bind us to certain situations. And that may help us, that may be forming certain likes, dislikes, and opinions that cause certain events to happen in our life. But when we face these situations of non-acceptance, we can still have a resolution to them. We may not be able to immediately accept the situation, but we can ask for strength to overcome this situation, and also strength to be able to deal with this non-acceptance. So there are always methods to progress in these situations, and we should never feel that we have no solution. And in fact, by using this form of acceptance and secondary acceptance, these are ultimately our tools to be able to come out of these what's referred to as material and spiritual bankruptcy. Any questions about this?
Are you able to provide an example of secondary acceptance?
Oh, sure. Okay, so well, suppose somebody that is a coworker comes and sees us, and we are very not accepting of that person. Maybe we don't find them to be very agreeable to our personality. And so maybe we try to avoid them, or we don't interact with them in a way that's really accepting of their, unique personality. Now it may be that we're not in the position to be able to accept them for who they are. So we are in a situation where we are in not acceptance. But rather than stopping there, there's still a tool. We can still reflect on that situation and realize that we're not accepting. And then we can ask for strength to overcome that. You can ask for strength either from internally or from God, or anything that any higher power that you might believe in. But it's asking for strength such that we can deal with this situation. And really, the key to that is first realizing that you're in a state of non-acceptance. Does that make sense?
Yes, because the moment that you actually observe something, you create space. So that allows you the space and the scope to be have creativity and towards that happening within you. So yes, that makes sense.
Yes, very well said. Yeah, I think that's a key. So there's space there because in that moment itself, we may have non-acceptance, but there's still opportunities subsequent to that where, like you said, there's space to reflect on it and then ask for strength such that when these events happen again in the future, we are more prepared to be able to build towards that future goal of acceptance.
Thank you. That was very helpful.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the question. And please, anybody else who has a question, please feel free to speak up. Now, this is really a wonderful story I heard on a YouTube video. So this is available online. There's this Swami Sarvapriyananda from the Ramakrishna order, and he told this parable that was actually originally from the Buddha, and it's the parable of two arrows. So I won't tell the whole story, but in gist, the gist of it is that you can imagine a man who is hit by one arrow, and normally this is a common story. We see that there may be some sort of violent event, and a person may be attacked or hit by one arrow. In this story, immediately after he's hit by one arrow, he's hit by another arrow. And this is meant to be a metaphor of the type of experience that we all have in our everyday life. The first arrow is the suffering that we experience from the external world. Like the person that I mentioned, maybe there's a car accident or some natural disaster, some external calamity. We also, in our everyday experience, experience a second arrow, which is one's reaction to the suffering. And often what we find is that second arrow actually causes more suffering than the first arrow. And so the first arrow may just be a simple event. Maybe you have a splinter in your foot, but that splinter may then cause you to have a bad mood for the rest of the day. And so that second arrow we find is really the key to much of the suffering that we experience in our life. And as we know, these type of sufferings, we've discussed this in some of the past lectures and also I think in some of the future lectures, these sufferings are ultimately determined by the actions that we have performed in the past. They are tied in a cause and effect relationship. So in order for us to help really deal with these various situations of life, it's important to be able to accept these events for what they are. And by accepting them, we really we'll be able to build resiliency to face these situations in the future. So does this story of two arrows make sense to everybody?
Yes, I guess the concept of not suffering two losses.
Yeah, we are going to suffer the effects of whatever happens as a consequence of our past actions anyway. But we often, after we have that first event, we go through this emotional suffering, and that can last for days or years in some instances. And so the effects of that are much more severe. And so by being able to deal with that secondary arrow, we can actually reduce our suffering. And this is tied to the concept that we're discussing today, because really the way to help lessen that suffering in the second arrow is to accept the first arrow in itself. And that helps to deal with this emotional consequence that is a reaction to that first event.
Oh, this is really very amazing and wonderful. My God, this parable can really make one contemplative. I am struck with the idea that the entire Bhagavad Gita, okay, Arjuna is in the state of non-acceptance of war. And then
Wow.
Krishna says you must accept this to avoid the second horrible arrow. My God, wonderful. Thank you, Nimesh. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. That was a beautiful connection. Thank you for sharing that. Now, moving from before we discussed non-acceptance and how non-acceptance was tied to suffering. So now let's kind of move along this spectrum from non-acceptance to acceptance. And we can see that suffering is also connected to acceptance. Now, as we discussed, one of the key aspects that is causally related to acceptance is the ego. And ego manifests in a variety of different ways. It could be arrogance or being stubborn. Fear and anxiety are different emotions that we discussed previously. And also, you may be restless. So all of these are different consequences of a strong ego. And we find that acceptance is actually a remedy to a strong ego. So what acceptance can do is it can actually clean the memory. Perhaps if a person has strong pains of past experiences, by accepting, it can actually help remove that suffering. Similarly, by accepting, we see that it actually is associated with receding of the ego. So acceptance is sort of like an antidote to having a strong ego. So it's a very, very powerful tool. Would anybody like to read this quote?
Sure, I don't mind.
Please, please.
Thank you.
It may look as if the situation is creating the suffering, but ultimately, this is not so. Your resistance is.
Oh, God.
Thank you. Beautiful. This is from Eckhart Tolle, who's I believe he's German, but he's a Western spiritual teacher. And again, you can see these are all universal concepts taught in many different ways, but ultimately expressing the same thing. And in fact, this also reminds me in a way of the parable we just discussed, because there's sort of this dual layer here of the situation and then our resistance to that situation. And that resistance, which is also the form of non-acceptance, that is what is creating the greater effects of the suffering. So you can see how all these concepts are tied together. Now, moving from non-acceptance to acceptance, one of the key aspects of acceptance is accepting other people and their beliefs and views. And so, really, the key to this is to accept individuals with equanimity and grace, and accept them for who they are and what they believe in. This has been phrased as everyone is correct according to their viewpoint. And also that acceptance is the essence of nonviolence and compassion. So these are expressed in Secrets of Holistic Living, again, all in chapter 1. And in the book, it also mentions that acceptance is actually a measure of our grace, culture, and creativity. I know, Shailaben, I think you also mentioned the word creativity earlier, if I recall, which is really a nice connection here. But it can be created by a strong auto-suggestion to accept. And this is tied to that concept we discussed earlier of secondary acceptance, because that's sort of like auto-suggesting to yourself to accept. So even if you can't accept in the first place, you can continually ask for strength um, uh, to be able to accept, and also to remind yourself when you observe that you have gone through an event, maybe earlier in the day, where you had an experience of non-acceptance, you can actually review that and recognize that you had that non-acceptance and ask for the strength not to make that mistake again. And slowly over time, you'll find that that builds this sort of acceptance muscle. And when those events happen again in the future, you'll be better prepared to be able to accept them. But this requires, of course, a patient effort over very long duration, I would say actually many lifetimes, in order to get to that state. So what are the effects of acceptance? Well, we know from the law of causality that whatever we get in our life, whether it's perhaps financially or in terms of our relationships and our circumstances around us, all of those are an effect from our past causes. And depending upon the extent of hostility and love within us, some experiences may be favorable and some may be unfavorable. However, you can actually experience that by accepting unfavorable people gracefully, their number decreases and life becomes more pleasant. So this was discussed again in the book, and this is really a beautiful concept. To me, what it's saying is that this is not something that is done immediately or overnight. This is something that is developed. It's a skill that happens over time. But you can actually experience the causes of this right in front of your eyes. And you can see that even if over the course of time, you slowly become more accepting, then nature then realizes or works with you and is able to respond accordingly. And you don't continually get these messages that are coming to you as lessons, because once you've learned them, nature is compassionate in that way. In addition, by practicing acceptance over long periods of time, that leads to the inner silence that I think, again, Shailaben was referencing earlier. And ultimately, by being accepting, that is the form of extreme nonviolence and compassion. And so really, acceptance is ultimately the goal of all of these different spiritual practices that we have. Now, the embodiment of acceptance is I think we all know is Shiv Bhagwan, and we can see here in this picture. This is actually depicting the wedding procession when Shiv Bhagwan was going to the wedding with Parvati Mataji, you can see here is depicting that he came, and I think this is a well-known story, but he came with all kinds of beings. He did not have any discrimination. He brought ghouls and disfigured beings, and of course, also positive beings. But he was completely accepting of everyone, and this is just epitomizes that level of compassion. And Shiv Bhagwan and Parvati Mataji are also known for having a harmonious marriage. And so again, they are able to accept each other. And that is an example for all of us to learn from as well. And Shiv Bhagwan is also known to forgive all of our mistakes and accept all of our prayers. So really, if we are looking for an example, there's so many stories that we can turn to. I do want to highlight one here. This is a story from the scriptures where there was an ancient conflict between the gods and demons, and the gods were defeated. However, they convinced the demons to work with them so that they could obtain this nectar of immortality. And they realized that this nectar existed in the world, but in order to get it, it could only be achieved by churning of the cosmic ocean. And so they couldn't do it alone. They had to work together with the demons. And so they managed to convince them to do this. But in that churning of the ocean, so many positive things were created in the world. However, in addition, a deadly poison was created that threatened the entire world. And Shiv Bhagwan, out of his compassion, actually took that poison and himself drank it. However, Parvati Mataji, she had compassion for her husband. So what she did is she held her husband by the throat, Shiv Bhagwan, and that stopped the poison from reaching his stomach. And the poison stayed in his throat such that the throat became blue. And so Shiv Bhagwan, as you may know, is also known as Nilakant, which means the one who is blue-throated. And this is a very beautiful picture that I'm sharing here that I found. It's a bird that actually has a blue throat. So nature has many reminders for us about examples of this level of compassion. But what does the story really tell us? From my perspective, Nilkant is really anyone who's able to swallow the negativities of the world and all of the abuses and various circumstances that we've faced in the world. But we swallow them, but we don't digest them. Instead, we're able to handle them with equanimity and balance. And rather than being instrumental in any reactionary negativity, we can actually be compassionate and bless others and thank them for helping us to resolve all of our past causes. So this is really a beautiful story. Anybody have any comments about this? Oh, okay. Thank you. Now, what this tells us is that there is a way to have acceptance in relationships. And as we discussed earlier, it's not always easy. In fact, most of the time in our relationships, we expect everybody else to change, but we ourselves don't want to change. And the key to successful and harmonious relationships is that we have to accept each other. Now, why do we have this non-acceptance in our relationship? It's typically because of the root causes related to expectations. We may expect other people or circumstances even to happen according to our wishes, but they don't. They never really happen according to the way we want. We may ask, why is a person acting in a certain type of way? And so what that really is we're not accepting them for who they are. And that causes perhaps suffering within that person because we treat them in a way that's not very accepting. So this then creates disharmony in those relationships. So what is the key to being able to have acceptance in relationships? It's really the key to this is understanding that there is a cause for all circumstances. And if we understand that there is a cause for all circumstances, and in fact, people are not necessarily responsible for those, then we actually have to accept people in situations as they are, not necessarily how we want them to be. And what this allows us is that it leads to an ability to adjust everywhere and with everyone. So these are, again, concepts from the holistic science. And so you can see how these are all tied together. So I'm just going to repeat that. Acceptance leads to the ability to adjust everywhere and with everyone. And that's really why this concept is so important to our spiritual progress. So I'd like to actually bring these shlokas from the Gita here. Would anybody like to read this for us? Any volunteers?
Yeah. Any one of the participant,
I can read.
Thank you.
please.
Yeah.
Anandji.
Yep. The senses are so strong and turbulent, O son of Kunti, and they can forcibly carry away the mind even of a person endowed with discrimination who practices self-control. They are established in perfect knowledge, who subdue the senses and keep the minds ever absorbed in me. While contemplating on the objects of the senses, one develops attachment to them. Attachment leads to desire, and from desire arises anger. Anger leads to the clouding of judgment, which results in the bewilderment of memory. When memory is bewildered, the intellect gets destroyed, and when the intellect is destroyed, one is ruined. But one who controls the mind and is free from attachment and aversion, even while using the objects of the senses, attains the grace of God.
Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. So this is a very long sort of causal explanation, but to me, the real key here is this really is related to the concept of acceptance, because acceptance is the key to removing and being free from attachment and aversion. And so when you can go through your everyday experience in life and not necessarily be affected by all of those second arrows, so to speak. So you can see how all these different things are tied together. And Chandrakant Kaka also beautifully connected to Gita earlier. I think this is actually really tying all of these concepts together. So what is the meaning of acceptance? If we start on the spectrum of non-acceptance, when I'm in the state of non-acceptance, what it means is that I want the circumstances and people to behave according to my desires and preferences. So this happens because it starts with ignorance, and ignorance leads to opinion. Opinion leads to some sort of either desire or resistance, and that eventually leads to suffering. In contrast, when one is in acceptance, it does not mean that you're okay with allowing injustice from the worldly standpoint. Rather, it means that you have an understanding that whatever happens is just. And this goes back to the very first quote that we read. And it goes to an understanding that there's a natural unfolding of circumstances and surroundings. And this is because you have an understanding that all circumstances happen according to this universal law of cause and effect. So by having this knowledge, it leads to an understanding of the law of nature. And by having this understanding, you can remove the opinions that we have in our life. And without these opinions, we remove the likes and dislikes, and that ultimately leads to acceptance. So I think this kind of goes to maybe the discussion we had earlier on secondary acceptance. Shaila Ben, does this also provide some guidance on that topic?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Yeah, I think by really understanding why circumstances happen according to the way they do, um, you have a better understanding of why people are the way they are, why circumstances happen as they do, and we learn to accept them for what they are because they are just happening according to this scientific principle.
Yes, and it's been the experience that the more we actively practice acceptance, it gives us insights into where we fell short in our past lives, and allows us to not only cultivate compassion for others, but also for ourselves.
Yes, beautiful. I didn't talk about that too much, but that's absolutely true. The one key thing is actually accepting ourselves, accepting the way this sort of this person that we are, the way that our nature and our reactions and being compassionate on ourselves is actually extremely important. So that's also tied to the secondary acceptance concept. The point is not to be harsh on yourself and get mad at yourself that you failed to be accepting. It's to recognize that you're in that state, and by doing that, you can slowly build this skill of really being able to understand and recognize these situations. So, absolutely, we not only need to accept the external circumstances, but also the internal circumstances as well. So, just kind of wrapping up here. Would somebody like to read this? This is a portion of a prayer by Adi Shankaracharya. Would somebody like to read this for me, please?
Yes, I could read it.
Please.
Meaning of acceptance. I am not the mind, intellect, ego, consciousness. I am not the organs of hearing, tasting, smelling, or seeing. I'm not space, nor earth, nor fire, nor air. I am the form of consciousness and bliss. I am Shiva. I am Shiva.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Now, Nirvana. So I might need help pronouncing their names, but Nirvana I could say.
Yeah, Nirvana Shatakam. So this is thank you, Nico. That was beautiful.
Thank you.
So this is it's a multiple verses to this prayer, but this is the beginning. And really, to me, what this is saying is sort of I wouldn't say not acceptance, but understanding really what I am um, uh, at the real level, which is this consciousness and bliss. Ultimately, Shivoham, Shivoham, I am Shiva. And by learning to accept that, that can help us to accept the external circumstances. So what I've tried to do at the bottom is to just kind of highlight these different type of acceptances. So the first one is that we must accept, or I must accept, that I am ultimately soul. And I must also accept that along with this soul, there is this temporary self. There are other beings around me. There are circumstances around me. I have to accept them for what they are. In addition, I have to accept that I do not have the power to change the past nor create the future. And this is tied to really accepting the present moment for what it is. I think many of us, I know myself, I'm often thinking a lot about the future, and that can create anxiety. Some people are often thinking about the past, and that may create anger or depression. So really being kind of aware and present in the current moment is a form of acceptance as well. And we have to recognize that we don't have the power to we don't have the power of doing. the power of doership is with this scientific law of cause and effect. And so that itself has to be accepted as well. Now, what is the value of acceptance? I think for each of us, we eventually come to this question of, what really matters in life? What is our goal? Is it material growth or is it spiritual growth? And if it's material growth, the way you achieve that is by acquiring various things, right? Physical, it could be money, it could be a house, a car, various physical objects. Spiritual growth, on the other hand, actually requires surrender. So it's not acquiring things, it's actually giving up. And we find that we often ask this question that I've referred to earlier in the discussion. We ask, why is a person behaving a certain way? Why do circumstances happen a certain way? And we can answer that question by having an understanding of whatever happens is based on the universal law of cause and effect. So once we have this understanding that everything is based on cause and effect, then the consequence of that is that we can accept them for what they are. For example, let's say I have a family member that I have a quarrel with. Now, normally, every day in our dealings, we might blame them for something. Let's say something was missing, and I thought my coworker took it from my desk. I might get angry at them. But when we think about it and we sort of understand that that event was actually a effect of a cause that was sown long ago, that person is actually not to blame for it. They're instrumental in living out the effect of that past cause. So there's no point to blame them. Really, the key to dealing with that situation is to accept the situation for what it is and to harmoniously deal with it and move forward to the next moment. Does this make sense to everybody? Any comments on this?
My goodness, this is amazing, wonderful, and it really enhances the sixth sense of a person. Thank you very much. It's wonderful.
Yeah, that's a really nice way to put it. It's almost like having a sixth sense where we have to, in every moment, we have to accept and sort of see. The key here to spiritual growth, as I said, is surrender. And by surrendering, really what we're doing is shrinking the ego. And if you all remember what we discussed very early in this in the lecture, is that the ego principle is one of the key aspects of non-acceptance. It's one of the key aspects of suffering. And so here you can see how these concepts are all tied together, because through acceptance, we have this shrinking of the ego, and therefore we have this spiritual growth. So really, this is really such a beautiful holistic science. So what is the value of acceptance? So in our everyday experience, we often encounter uncomfortable situations. And so the key here is understanding that we must accept the people who appear to be responsible for whatever the situation is by meditating on the real cause of our predicament. So we don't blame them for whatever that circumstance is. We understand that there is some real cause. Now, it's not our job to figure out what that cause is. We just have to understand that there is a cause that's in the past, and that person is not to blame. In fact, we should thank them because they were able to relieve us of that past seed that we had already sown. So this is just a way to sort of think about the difference between non-acceptance and acceptance. Non-acceptance is seeing something as something. So it is seeing things and then adding a label or adjective to them. basically forming an opinion about them. On the other hand, acceptance is simply seeing. It's observing a situation without having any judgment or opinion. And this is sort of like going through life, experiencing maybe the first arrow, but reducing the effects of the second arrow. And so by coming to this realization, we actually gain new skills and new opportunities by accepting people for who they are and accepting the world for what it is. We actually have two powers now that we can use when we go through life and experience these circumstances. On the one hand, we can, instead of blaming people for circumstances, we can actually thank them. We can thank them for relieving us of our past seeds that we had sown. In addition, we can also apologize because we ourselves are the cause of our own suffering and we are the cause of others' suffering. And so by encountering these situations, we should be thankful and we should also be remorseful and compassionate towards those around us. And with that, I conclude. So at this point, I will open it up. I'm happy to take any questions or comments, or if anybody would like to share stories, things that they have experienced, please unmute.
Yes, 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 yes. Please unmute yourself and let me begin. I offer my very humble obeisance and gratitude to Dr. Nimesh. This is what exactly the holistic scientist Dada Bhagwan wanted to convey by the word acceptance. Dr. Nimesh, you have really given very high definition, clear picture, and there was no any what we call the fear of any misinterpretation or any. So clear it was and so lovely. So it would really guide the entire mankind. The wonderful, very nice presentation, very effective and very appealing. The idea which really struck me very much was that the penance you talked about. Dadaji used to say, कि, and then the interpretation absolutely of a contemporary interpretation, the present interpretation of the ages old scriptures. That was very amazing. Thank you very much, Dr. Nimesh. And the penance you talked of, Dadaji used to say कि you should go for the penance which is available in the family, in the society, in your at your own place. No need to go to far off in jungle or any Himalayan place. Huh? And Nilakantha that you talked about, drinking the poison. With every day there is too much poison from boss to employee, from wife to husband and vice versa, from children to parent, no? Everywhere. So that is really amazing. Thanks a lot, sir. Huh? Participants, and please open up if you have anything to discuss. You can. Sheila ma'am.
Hi, that was excellent. Really appreciate you sharing your insights, and obviously you've done a lot of research as well. So it really brought a tremendous amount of kind of reinforced the importance of focusing on acceptance, because it allows us to observe ourselves first and foremost, because you have to pause when you accept, and that gives us that space to pause and observe, and be less reactive. So thank you so much.
Yes,
Excellent
beautiful.
presentation.
Thank you. Both beautiful
Okay,
comments.
okay. So let us conclude. Thank you very much, Dr. Nimesh, and I appreciate your sense of timing, also time management. My God, So many important things, profound things you covered in the given time. Salute to you, sir. Thank you very much. And let us meet again on the session of next month. That will be meditation as prescribed by the holistic scientist Dada Bhagwan. Everybody, Jai Sachidanand, thank you very much for joining. Do come back once again with your friends and relatives. HSRCF is very, very pleased that you are here. Thank you very much. Dr. Nimesh, gratitude to you, sir. Thanks a lot.
Jai Sachidanand. Thank
See
you.
you the next month on 30th November, I think. The notification will be shared in advance. Thank you, Dr. Nimesh. Thank you very much.